Thank you everyone for coming to this very special workshop. Today we have Carolyn Gardner, who has a very fitting name, to go ahead and present about the method of seed saving. It's a age-old tradition and it's one of the really great ways you can have sustainable practices in your garden. Um, this this is kind of get us into a seed library that's going to be started on campus at Dominguez Hills in January of 2022. We'll be having a seed library, and I think Carolyn's going to go ahead and cover a little bit more about what that means. And we're really excited to have her here presenting, hopefully getting started on these methods that we can maybe implement on our own urban farm as well. So Carolyn, take it away.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Well, thanks for having me, everybody, to talk about one of my favorite topics. Here's what we're going to kind of cover today. And I want to tell you a little bit about myself and my expertise or lack thereof in this area. My name's Carolyn, and I am a librarian by trade and by practice and training. So not a horticulturalist, a librarian. And you may have seen me around campus. I'm the anthropology, sociology, and psychology librarian. I also coordinate all of our instructional programming. But when I'm not at work, I have just been, super active in gardening for 15, 20 years. And gardening is one of those things, growing your own food, growing flowers, native plants. You can't really get that kind of learning from a book, even though I love books so much. Experience is a huge part of it. So I have experience saving seeds. I've taken some online classes through the Rocky Mountain Seed School. And through the UC Master Gardeners. But a lot of what I'm sharing with you today is from other seed saving resources, and it's really in support of the seed library. So I don't consider myself a seed saving expert, just somebody else who does a little dabbling in it, happy to share what I know, but I'm sure there's lots I can learn from you all, and we can all learn together the more we do this. So here's what we're going to cover today, and I will just jump right into how I got here. Which is about, why are we saving seeds and why the heck is the library involved in this endeavor? Well, saving seeds has many powerful sustainability reasons, but my first and foremost thing I would say to anybody interested in saving seeds is it's really fun. It's a way to connect with plants throughout their life cycle beyond just, eating the goodness from that vegetable harvest. And it really connects you to all parts of the growing process. So it can really just enrich your own gardening experience. But seed saving is cheap. It is cost effective. Think about when you get, I don't know, a tomato. How many seeds are inside that tomato, right? Dozens and dozens and dozens. And you might spend $3, $4, $5 for a package of those seeds. Only maybe has 20, 30, 40 seeds in it. And you can get all of those seeds pretty much for free from the produce you're already growing. So there's a great cost saving element in that you can sustainably renew your garden over time based on what you've been growing. There is also an element related to climate change. We are living in a time where things are getting hotter and drier. We've seen it just even in the last few years in the Dominguez Hills area. And the plants that you are growing often are from seeds that are not adapted to our local regions, particularly if you're purchasing them at, a big box store like Lowe's or Home Depot, just off the seed rack. And so after a few generations of you growing that tomato or growing that squash here in the Dominguez Hills area, your plants and therefore your seeds start to become adapted to our local climate, whether that's maybe a little hotter, a little drier, even the own unique microclimates in your growing conditions. So saving seeds over time really helps preserve traits that help them adapt to the local environment that you are growing in. They're also an important part of preserving genetic diversity. If you've ever looked at a gardening catalog, and I'm sure you've done like what I've done, like, oh my gosh, there are a million different kinds of broccoli. When I go to the grocery store, there's just really one kind of broccoli. And so saving your own seeds really helps you preserve that genetic diversity we see in plants that we grow that aren't necessarily produced commercially. And therefore, there are generations of seeds that are dying out. There's a lot of fun facts about beets. There used to be, over 400 varieties of beets widely grown in the early 1900s through commercial seed catalogs. And now you open up a catalog and you might get a few. So saving your own seeds really helps preserve the genetic diversity for future generations as well. And you get lots of unique options. You can grow things from seed that you just can't find in either a start at a nursery or at the grocery store, or wherever else you might be wanting to look for vegetables, flowers, and other kinds of produce. So I was sold on seed saving, but again, day job, librarian. And I don't know if you have heard, but there are seed libraries. And these are collections that are available to the public of seeds, usually through donation, and they are free, right? Just like other library materials, lend a book, take a book. And we're planning to do that with seeds as well. We got to reopen first, COVID, right? Did a huge number on services. So we've got to kind of get this semester under our belt. But in January, we are planning to open up a seed library within our facility. So we don't have a location at the moment. There's a little construction going on in the building, but we're hoping somewhere on the second floor of the library, the main floor, if you haven't been in there, we will have one of our card catalogs, which we dug out of our basement area. They look like this beautiful cabinet. Back in the day, this is where the information on various books we had pre-internet catalog existed. We still have a lot of these, and we're going to repurpose them and really store seed envelopes like you see on the right here in these card catalogs for any member of the CSUDH community, whether that's students, faculty, staff, or just somebody in the local area who wanders into the library, where you can come in, take seeds for free. We're going to have, recommended amount. And as you grow your own produce and you save seeds, you can bring them back and replenish our connection. So it's really going to be sort of this full circle process. You grow seeds, you can bring them back if you're able to. And right now we are soliciting donations. We've got quite a decent stock of donations. So when we open in January, we should have lots of different seeds for you to choose from. I also have a website, which I'll share towards the end of the presentation, where you can see the seeds we have that have been donated, a little bit about how it's going to work, and get excited and tell your friends, the library has books, the library has streaming video, but in January, the library is going to have seeds as well. So I got into seed saving and seed libraries specifically and sort of marrying those two interests, right? I'm a librarian by day. I also garden by day. And so it was really a place to bring those two loves together in a way that supports our campus community as well. So before you embark on the how-to in terms of seed saving, it's helpful to know some of the terminology that you might see on seed packets or in other materials when you do some Googling about various seed saving techniques. All of these, this is really the key terminology you need to save seeds effectively and efficiently. So the first thing is hybrid. How many of you have heard of like a hybrid vegetable or a hybrid fruit? Maybe you're even growing some right now. I would say, yeah, hybrid cherry tomatoes. Ugh, I love them, right? So Jessica, I saw your hand go up. So there are a lot of hybrid vegetable varieties in particular. Cherry tomatoes are some of my favorites, many varieties there. And these are plants that have been cross-pollinated essentially from different parent species. So because of this, because it's sort of the mixing of different cultivars, you can't really save these seeds. So if you are currently growing like a hybrid cherry tomato and you want to save seeds for next year, you can, but what you plant is not going to be the beautiful fruit that you currently have. So it's important when it comes to seed saving that you kind of take note, is this a hybrid variety? Often hybrid varieties are very clearly marked on either the seed package or if you purchase the nursery start, because it's often a selling point. Hybrid varieties usually are bred for specific traits and they want to market that in particular. So these are not true to parent seeds. So we typically don't recommend that you save these unless you want to get creative, do some Frankenstein plant breeding of your own. Within the CSUDH seed library, we don't distribute any hybrid seeds. So everything in our library is going to be something that you can grow and save the seed and plant it year after year again and get what you expect. When it comes to hybrid varieties as well, you might also see nomenclature like F1 or F2 on a seed packet. I can never pronounce this word, but it stands for filial. It has to do with how many generations removed from the original parent plant it is. So an F1 is one generation removed from that parent plant. And you may also see something that says like F1 red cherry tomato. That would be another indication that it's a hybrid plant. Now, the flip side of this, if it's not hybrid, the default, the original, is open pollinated. These are plants that are just naturally pollinated, whether that's by wind or by insects. These plants will produce seeds exactly like their parents year after year, and they are ideal for seed saving. This is what we have in the CSUDH seed library and what we hope to continue to distribute. And this is what we would recommend you keep an eye out for seed saving. Because open pollinated is sort of like the default, it's often not indicated on either seed packages or nursery starts. Essentially, you're looking for the absence of the word hybrid. If it doesn't say hybrid, chances are it's open pollinated. And I definitely do some little Googling. So I'll type in a variety and add open pollinated to find out if you're ever unsure. Heirloom is another term that you might have heard when it comes to growing. Are folks familiar with that term, or you've seen it pop up? Yeah. So all heirlooms are open pollinated varieties. Heirlooms are essentially long-term heritage varieties. These are cultivars of typically a vegetable that have a story associated with them, where we know and can trace the lineage. So all heirlooms are open pollinated. Not all open pollinated plants are heirlooms. Heirlooms are sort of like special plants that have a story to go along with their open pollinated status. And the last piece of terminology to know is really utility patents or Plant Variety Protection Act. You may see this in commercial seed catalogs or big seed distributors, places like Burpee, Johnny's, things like that. Utility patents or Plant Variety Protection Act protect plants. These are species cultivars that have been essentially copyrighted. So if you think about intellectual property and copyright, the actual plant has been copyrighted. And what this means is you are not allowed to save the seeds and you cannot distribute the seeds. Usually this doesn't impact the home gardener or the urban farm. This is for, big farms, big monoculture farms. But just in case, we ask that if you are bringing things back to the CSUDH library, that you're saying they're not Utility Patent or Plant Variety Protection Act protected seeds, because you don't want to get us in trouble. So we don't distribute any of those as well. And they don't pop up as frequently, though many commercial seed companies are copywriting and protecting more and more plants every year. Oh, I lied. There's more terminology. The last two pieces of important terminology are really about plant types. So we know we want those open pollinated, potentially heirloom varieties. That's what we're going to be saving our seeds from today. And within that, there are two different types of plants that we most frequently encounter. Those are annuals and biannuals. So annuals are things that produce seed every growing cycle. I always find the term annual a little deceiving. Often a growing cycle isn't a full year. In Southern California, it tends to be a little less. Some places it can be more. I used to live in Minnesota. And oh man, overwintering my tomatoes and trying to get them going, they felt like they were triannual tomatoes. So annual plants are going to be the things where you can collect the most seeds every growing season, super easy. This is where I'd recommend starting with your seed saving. Common annuals are peppers, tomatoes, squash, lettuce, most greens, peas, beans, everything listed there. Biannuals are a little trickier. They don't produce seed every growing season. They typically require like an overwintering period where they have produced the beet, then they get cold and they die back, and then later in the next growing season, they shoot up flowers and produce that seed. Many of these you'll notice are sort of like root vegetables like beets, carrots, Onions, parsnips, celery, turnips, and leeks are the most common biannuals. And you can still save seeds from those. You just kind of have to pay attention to what growing period you're in. Are there any questions on the terminology? Because next we get to like the fun part, which is like, how do you do it? Okay, well, if you do have questions, we will have question and answer at the time, but I honestly don't mind if you interrupt with something. So this is an example of, I believe this is from the Johnny's seed catalog online of what you might see if you've ordered seeds somewhere commercially. So this is a bok choy variety, and you may notice it says F1. So this is a hybrid, not something I probably want to do my seed saving from. You'll notice here down in the left corner, it says hybrid F1, but it is an annual. So those are kind of the areas where you might see this information show up on an online seed catalog or on a seed packet. You'll often see something like annual. If it's hybrid, they usually let you know, as well as other information like its Latin name or how long it takes to reach maturity. This can be helpful to know as well, because obviously once it's reached maturity, that's when you're going to start getting your seeds, when the plant is fully mature. So it gives you some indication of sort of how long you have to wait, how patient you have to be. There are three main methods when it comes to saving seeds. So the first one is super easy. It is my favorite. It's called the dry method. And this is great for beans, peas, a lot of different herbs like basil, a bunch of different flowers, lettuces, cilantro, anything like that. This is essentially where you just let the seeds dry on the plant. So if you have ever been growing green beans and oh my gosh, it's August and you're so sick of eating green beans, you kind of just forget to keep harvesting them. You may have noticed like you'll end up with like dry, sad beans on your plant. But they're not dry and sad because you can use this to grow green beans next year. So if you have the space, you're not pulling your plants out right away as they have mature fruits on them. Let a few green beans just get dry and crispy. And then you can take them off, and right inside, there's your seeds. That's what you plant next year. So this can be really easy if you're not starting a seed company, just small scale, just let a few of your fruits, your vegetables sort of over ripen and get dry. For many things that flower, they'll produce the flower and then you'll have these like dry little seeds. If you don't have time, you want to, dig that plant out and plant something else right away, you can take the whole plant out. So I've done this with like lettuce, right? Small. Take the whole lettuce out, plant something else there and just hang it somewhere to dry. So I've stuck it in my garage. I've put them in a bucket just outside in the shade. Essentially, you just want to let the plant really naturally dry out your seeds. And so here's some more pictures of like things that you could potentially do the dry method for. So bok choy, if I just continue to let those flowers dry out, I'm going to start to get the little seeds. Sometimes I'll put like a paper bag over the flowers or a few of them to make sure I don't lose any seeds in my garden if I forget to check on them regularly. Same thing with like on the right, we have some cilantro going to seed and just letting it dry out on the plant. If you have the time and space, you don't need to turn over whatever it is where you're gardening. Some more pictures of things that you would use the dry method for, a lot of flowers and herbs. So on the left, we have a calendula flower. The yellow petals, just everything dries up, becomes this brown thing on the right, and each one of those little petals now has a seed attached to where it used to be, and you just kind of crumble it up, and there you go. Popcorn or corn, it's as easy as it seems. You just let the ear dry out on the stalk, get brown and crispy. The second type of method, any questions about the dry method? You could totally save seeds this way pretty much exclusively, and it's so fun. So yeah, this is definitely the one I would recommend getting started with, is the dry method. The semi-wet method is great for any seeds that are a little bit more goobery, the technical term there. I find that this works best for peppers, melons, squashes, anything where you're kind of digging seeds out of a cavity. And so for this, you really want your vegetable to be very, very ripe or overripe. So if you've ever let something like a zucchini stay on too long and it's all like big and kind of gross, that's perfect for seed saving. Because that plant has reached maturity, it's produced its seeds, the seeds are fully mature, and you can tell that they're going to definitely be something you can germinate in the future. And this is also really easy. In this picture, we have a hot pepper. You just kind of scoop the seeds out. You want to rinse them because they do have a little bit of slime on them. And that's it. And put them somewhere where they can dry. You really need to make sure that your seeds dry out all the way so that you don't get any mold or anything like that in your seed stock. So here's another picture of a watermelon. So this, watermelons are great for seed saving. You got to spit them out anyway while you're eating. So just put them in a bowl or in something where you can rinse. In this case, I think I've used a metal strainer. And then I just lay them on a paper plate until they're totally dry. I would recommend when you are leaving your seeds out to dry, if your house isn't too humid, you can totally just stick them on a shelf somewhere and just let them dry out. If you're in a really humid environment, you may want to put them in the fridge. People will do that as well if you've got space. I like to use paper plates or regular plates, but you can really just lay them out however you wish to really dry and have that space. I do recommend against paper towels, only because I have learned the hard way when you dry things on paper towels, they stick to the paper towel and you then end up planting bits of paper towel as well. It's really hard to get all the seeds off. When it comes to straining or kind of rinsing seeds, you can use whatever you have on hand. You don't need any fancy equipment. So when I first started on a smaller scale, I just use like a T-ball and just do a few seeds at a time to get any goober off and just give it a little rinse. But if you've got, maybe you're doing, I don't know, a bunch of watermelons all at once, you could just take a pasta strainer where the seeds aren't going to fall through. Or you can just kind of do it in your hands carefully. It really works all the way around. And then, much to the chagrin of my family, I just have paper plates covered with seeds on, it feels like every surface. And it takes usually a few weeks for them to fully dry out. It always takes longer than you think. The last method for seed saving is the wet method. And this is great for any type of seed that has like a protective gel. So if you've cut open a tomato and it's got that goober, cucumbers, eggplants as well, anything that's got that gooey gel that's kind of around the seed. The wet method helps ferment that gel off, which helps prevent disease in your seed. It also just helps dry it out so that you can store it more effectively and make sure that your seed is all ready to be planted. So what you're going to do is cut your tomato, your cucumber, whatever it is, so that you can get at the seeds, and then squeeze them into like a jar or a bowl or whatever it might be. Just squeeze all the seed out. And so you can see here, we've got the jar, all the tomato seeds. You can see they've got that goobery gel that's so hard to get off. You can rinse these to your heart's content and you can never get the gel off. So this is why this fermentation method is really helpful. What you're going to then do is cover your jar with something that still allows the air to flow through, a coffee filter, a napkin, a paper towel. You can use like a hair tie or rubber band, something to make sure bugs don't get in, but air can still get in. And you're just going to let that sit for a few days. It's going to get a little bit stinky, and then it's going to get a little bit of scum looking mold on the top, just kind of gross. At that point, once it looks gross, you're ready. At that point, you're going to go ahead and just rinse those seeds, and you're going to be amazed because they will just come away from that gel. You will have those clean seeds. You'll just lay them out to dry at that point. Usually takes a few days. If you have a lot of tomato seeds or cucumber seeds, anything with that gel, you can fill up like a whole jar with it. This was just like 1 or 2 tomatoes as an example for this workshop. But if you have just 1 tomato, like this tomato, you can add a little water, just a little bit, to help speed that process along as well. Has anybody done this method before? It's very addicting. At first, you're like, it's so much extra work. I don't care. But if you're making tomato sauce or something, you often end up squeezing a lot of those seeds out anyway. And so this can be a great way to hold on to the varieties you like for future years. All right. So some general tips when it comes to saving seeds. You want to save from ripe or overripe vegetables. Your seed needs to be fully mature with inside the fruit. So if you have picked like a green bell pepper, and it's a type of pepper that will eventually become red, you don't really want to save seeds from it. Those seeds are still immature, and it's likely that many of them won't fully germinate or may have some health issues when you get them going. So if you have left something a little too long out in the garden, that is the perfect candidate for seed saving. Likewise, the seeds that you are saving, you're saving those genetic traits, and you're, creating little seed children with those same genetic traits. So you don't want to save from seeds that have succumbed to disease. Maybe your squash got taken over with powdery mildew. Probably not a good idea to save seeds from that disease-ridden plant, because you're passing along those traits to the future varieties. So you always want to save seeds from your best, brightest, your favorite varieties, the best looking plant that you have. Those are going to be the strongest seeds in the future. The other thing that I would recommend is make sure you note the variety you saved. I don't know about you all, but I always think, I remember what I planted. I remember what I saved. And I never do. It is always a lie. Write it down, particularly if you're going to be bringing things back to our seed library, or you've checked seeds out from our seed library. You're going to want to remember the cultivar, the name of the species, because we need that information to distribute it and make sure we're distributing something that is open pollinated and not protected by the Plant Variety Protection Act. So another reason I like saving on paper plates is you can write, with a Sharpie, what variety it was, so that you remember when it comes time to plant those again next year or donate them back to the seed library. When it comes to storing your seeds, after they've all dried out, you really want to make sure they're dry. And then you're going to want to store them somewhere where you have a little bit longer term storage. The key with seeds is they will last the longest if they are in dry, dark, and cool conditions. Anything under 80 degrees is ideal. So you don't want to leave seeds in your car for a long period of time, or if you have like a garden shed or an outdoor gardening space, it's really tempting to leave the seeds with your other supplies, but we do recommend, bring them inside, bring them somewhere cool. If you have the space in your freezer and fridge and you want to go with like full seed saving mentality, you can definitely store them there and they will last a long time in your freezer in particular. Your container does not necessarily need to be airtight that you're storing your seeds in, like a paper envelope, for example. That's often how you purchase seeds. Those are totally fine. You can also store your seeds in glass jars, plastic containers or Tupperwares, or plastic bags. Containers that are airtight will last. You'll be able to save your seeds longer, like years and years. But it's really whatever you have on hand, you probably have something that works just fine for saving your seeds. Most seeds easily last over 3 years. There are lots of different charts on there on the internet of like, how long does the seed last? And you'll find all different kinds of ranges. These are common tests on commercial varieties, but there are lots of stories out there of seeds lasting much longer. There are some exceptions. Corn, onion, and parsley are probably the most common exceptions. Those seeds tend to quickly age and become no longer viable after a year or so. You will still find viable seeds, you just have to takes a lot to go through. So those ones recommend, not sticking in your freezer for 10 years and coming back to, but many other seed varieties you can. And a great example of this is the photo here of the Methuselah date palm. These seeds are from 100 BCE. They were found in the 1960s in some clay pots. They were saved, and botanists, brought the plant back to life, essentially, this date palm, which had since been extinct. So, that just goes to show you never know with your seeds. They can still last a really long time. So if you bought something last year, you haven't used it, you don't have to panic and throw it out quite yet. You still probably have some viable seeds in there. And if you want to test, do I have viable seeds? I only test if I have like a lot, like hundreds of seeds, which you probably will at the urban farm, or the seeds that we collect in our library. When we first get a big donation, we do some germination tests. The easiest way to do a germination test to figure out how many seeds are viable, maybe you find under your bed like an old packet of seeds, and you are like, I don't know if any of these will even work anymore. You can test them by soaking a paper towel or a cloth towel, placing the seeds on that moist paper towel in a 10 by 10 grid, and then measuring how many sprout after a few days. I usually will do like one damp paper towel, and then I'll place my seeds, and then I'll do like another damp towel on top, on like a plate or somewhere kind of out of the way in my house. I'll come back to it in a few days, and then I'll just count how many have sprouted. And then because it's the 10 by 10 grid, you've got 100 seeds there. If 70 of them sprouted, you have a 70% germination rate, which would be really awesome. Many seed varieties, things that you buy in the store, a lot of them have only a 40 or 50% germination rate. So I find when you save seeds from your own garden or from your own growing conditions, you often get much higher germination rates, which is really exciting. So if you ever find something old, you're not totally sure, you can always test it. Some legal stuff about germination. Anything in the state of California that's under a half a pound doesn't need to be tested legally to be sold or distributed. So the seeds in our library are primarily donations, primarily from previous growing years. So we reach out to companies, do you have any seeds from 2020 you can give us? And they do. So they may have slightly lower germination rates, but we don't test them because they are usually under that half-pound limit. The California standards, if you really want to nerd out, you can go to this, this link, which I'll copy and paste in the chat, but you can see what are the germination rates for different common varieties. So the one that always cracks me up is carrots. Carrots are only like 55%, which feels so true every time I plant carrots. It just feels like a crapshoot. And that is because a lot of them are not necessarily viable. The legal requirements for their germination rates are a lot lower than you would think. It's not 100%. In California, seed packets, it's 40 to 80, depending on the range. But you can still sell seeds with lower germination rates. You just have to say they're below standard on the package. So again, everything in our seed library, it's probably within the 40 to 80. We don't test it, so there may be some that are slightly lower as well. And when you start collecting your own seeds, it can be really fun to see if you're meeting those standards, often you're way exceeding them. Some other considerations when it comes to saving seeds. I've also learned this the hard way. As most things in gardening, you get to learn the hard way, right? And that is that members of the cucumber and squash families can cross-pollinate with each other. So if you would like to save seeds, particularly if you're going to bring them back to our library, you do want to make sure that the seeds you're saving from the vegetable that you have harvested are not some weird funky variety that you've just created in your yard. So squash and cucumber families will cross-pollinate. I don't know if you've ever seen very bizarre looking cucumbers, or I had an unfortunate experience with yellow crookneck squash pollinating with my zucchini, and then I had like a weird hybrid mix of the two. So I didn't end up saving any seeds from those. So they'll cross-pollinate and create these new funky varieties pretty easily. So if you want to cut down on that, you'll also get better tasting vegetables if you do, is you can plant things within the same squash family really far apart. So maybe if you've got like a front yard and a backyard, or you've got one garden plot on this side of the farm and one over here, you can do, your box of pumpkins over there and your zucchinis over here to ensure they don't cross-pollinate. That's the easiest way if you have the space to help cut back on that. The other thing you can do is plant them a few weeks apart so that they are blooming at different times. So maybe your zucchini has gotten going first and it's a few weeks further along in its growing cycle, and now you're starting your pumpkin seeds. So they're not going to be fruiting and flowering at the same time. It's another way you can avoid that cross-pollination. The more complicated version is you can hand pollinate and then cover the flowers. So this would be particularly for squash. If you are pollinating one of the female flowers with a male flower, you'll often see people will use like clothespins, paper bags, dryer sheet, and they'll put it over the female flower to make sure that no other pollen can get in there, so that they can have a true to parent variety. I would say that's the more expert level. You're selling your seeds or you're really worried about genetics that you're carrying on. I generally don't do that, but I also don't grow that many squash varieties. So it's not usually a thing to worry about. But yeah, you do want to be aware that some of your varieties can cross-pollinate with each other, and that will impact the seed that you save. The other thing is, if you are seed saving at a super larger scale, you get really into it, you're going to really become a key donor to the seed library. It can be worth the investment in additional supplies to thresh and clean your seeds, particularly if you're saving more than a green bean or two at a time. The supplies that I would recommend as most useful are mesh screens. You can get these at any hardware store as well as online. This particular photo is from Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, and you're essentially looking for a wide variety of meshes. So the larger mesh screen that you see on the leftmost part of that picture, you would dump all your seeds in there, shake it up like you're panning for gold, and the seed will fall through the hole, and the larger chaff or other debris like flower petals or just dust will stay behind. And then you kind of go further down till you get to a smaller screen where the seed can still fall through, but further separating out dust or other small particulates. Not super necessary for beans, but if you've got something like, let's see, I think these are a bunch of seeds from a zinnia. Let's see, dumping these all on my laptop, but these are from a flower petal. So when the seed is formed, you've got the seed, and at the top was the flower petal that was attached. And so as they've collected in my jar, you can tell I have not screened these. I have pieces of petal not attached to seed. I've got petals and seeds combined. I've got just seeds. These would be a great candidate for dumping through some mesh here to really sift out the pieces of petal and other kind of dust that I don't need. But again, you don't need any of those things to get started seed saving. It's one of those great things you can just do without additional supplies or really a lot of even planning. You can just kind of do it on the fly. And I've certainly saved seeds by accident many times. So in terms of resources, other recommendations, I really like the Seed Saver Exchange crop by crop growing guides. That's the picture you see below here on these slides. They really go through like, what do beet seeds look like? Where do they come from? They have the crop by crop growing guide so that you can really see what the seed looks like on all those different varietals. They talk about whether you might want to try the dry method or the wet method, depending on the plant there, and how long they'll store and how long they recommend that those seeds are still good for. I have found their estimates to be pretty conservative. You can definitely go longer than what they have there. For native plants, Native Seed Search, also linked here, and I'll share these slides in a moment. are also a great place to check out for native plants how to save seeds. And then last but not least is our own seed library website. So let me go ahead and throw that link in the chat and I'll show you what that looks like. And we've got all of these linked there, as well as other resources. So let me pull that up. So this is our seed library website. It's on our library website along with everything else. You can see the mission of our seed library. We prioritize, right, those heirloom and open pollinated plants. We've got some information about why you want to do it, info about using our seed collection, what we have in stock. So I think this is up to date. So this should have many more by the time we go live in January. And then lots of information here about saving seeds as well as other gardening resources. So this includes the terminology we've discussed and the information from Seed Savers Exchange, Native Seed Search, all that is linked here as well. And that is on the Saving Seeds tab. Let me go back to my slides. Okay. And we're a library, so we also have books. Those books have been ordered, but they're not currently ready to be checked out. But in January, we'll have 2 or 3 key manuals about saving seeds. If you are somebody who wants to have the book in hand while you're looking at them, these will be located on the same cabinet with where you check out the seeds. We'll have a little curated collection of books as well. So those can all be great places to find more information. And fellow gardeners are also great, always happy to share information, I find. So that is what I have prepared for us today, but I'd love to hear your questions, as well as your experiences, if you have experience in saving seeds. And yeah, just have a conversation with you all. So I'll go ahead and stop my slides.
Thank you, Carolyn, for presenting. That concludes the presentation portion of this. We'll be continuing with the Q&A next for anyone who has questions.